Hello, everyone. Welcome to the second in the 7th annual Champinefu webinar series. The title of tonight's event is Fire is Life, Living in Relation with Indigenous Fire Practices of Western Oregon. We're really happy you're here tonight. My name's Bonnie Brzozowski. I'm a public services librarian at the Corvallis-Benton County Public Library. And as usual, I want to take just a quick second to orient you to the platform we're using today. To submit any questions throughout the evening's presentation that we will answer towards the end of the event, please click on Q&A. It's usually in the top left corner of your window. Sometimes it's just a question mark. Depends on the device you're using. Just a note that we are going to send a video recording of today's event via email to everyone who registered within approximately 24 to 48 hours of the event. The recordings are also posted to our YouTube channel, usually within a few weeks after the event, and I'm actually going to share a link to the first in the Champinefu series, which was titled Willamette River Ancestral Highway. I'm going to share that here in the chat. So here we go. I hope that you will watch that one and enjoy it. It was really wonderful. We also have videos from previous years of the Champinefu webinar series on our YouTube channel, the library's YouTube channel. You can check out a playlist of them at another link that I'm going to also put in the chat because I really hope that you will see all of these wonderful videos as well. Great. The final event in this year's series is actually going to be in person. It's going to be at the OSU Alumni Center on Tuesday, December 12th. It will also be held from 7 to 8:30 p.m. and it's titled Winter Storytelling: Indigenous Stories of Place. You can read more about this event on the library's website at yet another link I will provide in the chat. And here it comes. So we hope to see you there. Now I'm going to bring on Dave Eckert. He's going to tell us more about the Champinefu series and more about the December event, as well as introduce the series co-sponsors and our presenters for tonight. Dave is part of the Mary's Peak group of the Sierra Club and is one of the coordinators of this event series. Dave, take it away.
Oh, thank you. Let me bring up this PowerPoint here and start it from the beginning. Okay. Well, thank you, Bonnie. It's been an honor working with you all these past years. And I'd like to welcome everybody to Champinefu, where this webinar is being hosted. And for those who haven't been to one of these, Champinefu is the Kalapuya name for the area in Benton County, the Marys River Valley, that currently includes some communities called Corvallis and Philomath, and the Champinefu Kalapuya have lived here for thousands and thousands of years. And so we're very pleased to be able to bring this to you. We have been doing this series since 2017 every year, and it has changed over the years from being live at the Majestic Theater to then becoming webinars. And we are starting to evolve back, as Bonnie said, to a combination of other modalities of presenting the series that you'll learn about in the future. Our purpose is to build understanding and relationships among the Kalapuya and the people currently living in Champinefu, and with the Confederated Tribes of the Grand Ronde and the Confederated Tribes of Siletz Indians, particularly, and those two cases. And we feel like we've been moving along rapidly on this and making some real improvements in how we're doing this. The Confederated Tribes of the Grand Ronde have been selecting the presentation subjects, like tonight's Fire is Life, and also selecting the presenters, like tonight's presenters, Joe Scott. And so this is that is completely within their purview to make those selections. We do have numerous co-sponsors. The first sponsor locally here was the Mary's Peak group of the Sierra Club, and has been a co-sponsor every single year since 2017. And another co-sponsor that has been here since 2017 is the Spring Creek Project for Ideas, Nature, and the Written Word. They're hosted out of Oregon State University and have been a wonderful co-sponsor also. In 2021, we're very excited to add the Corvallis-Benton County Public Library to the co-sponsor list, and that brought in the city and the county through the work of the public library, and that was very important for the growth of this project. And then I think it was the same year, I think we brought in the Corvallis Sustainability Coalition, which is a coalition of over 400 different organizations and agencies and faith communities in Champinefu. And that has been a big help. And they also brought a big donation from Francis Stillwell that has helped us survive as a program over the last few years. And we all thank Francis for that. This year, we're very excited to add the School of Language, Culture, and Society to the list of co-sponsors in Oregon State University, and that adds a whole new level to this program. With Oregon State, the city, the county, the coalition, the Mary Speak group of the Sierra Club, and the Spring Creek Project, we now have a large community support system that is looking to build relationships and understanding and move to the next level. And we believe by bringing Oregon State University fully on board on this, that's really going to help us move to the next level. Those who watched, as Bonnie said, the Willamette River Ancestral Highway, and all you have to do is you can go on the library website, or you can just go onto YouTube and search for the Willamette River Ancestral Highway. And I urge you to watch it if you haven't done so already. And you notice the boat there. I want to tell you something that's very important in the evolution of this Champinefu lecture series is we're now trying to bring it beyond education. We're trying to create action now, and we're going to be starting a fundraiser to be able to commission a member of the Grand Ronde to build a canoe that can be housed in Corvallis for the Indigenous Studies program at OSU and for the various Confederated tribes to use when they come to Corvallis if they so choose. And that would be very exciting. If this intrigues you as a viewer, and you can email me, so I can give me your email address, and then I can contact you when the fundraising begins, because we will have to raise a few dollars for that. But that's a great result of this program. And as Bonnie mentioned, that in December, we're going back to an in-person program, and that gets back to so we can have personal relationships and there again, rather than just virtual. And so, and most of you in Corvallis have been to the Alumni Center. There is no registration at all. It is first come, first seated, and the doors open at 6:30. We ask that you come between 6:30 and 7 because we'll be closing the doors at 7. And there will be no recording of this. It's live. It's a very special program. I don't think anybody will have seen anything like this before who are living in Corvallis or Philomath. And but just so you know, this is the only opportunity to see this. And we're very excited that Joe is with us tonight. And what I'll say, because David Harrelson is going to be introducing Joe, but Joe was last with the Champinefu presentation in 2018, and he came to just a short trip from his house, very short trip to Corvallis, and he introduced Shannon Stutzman for a talk about storytelling of the Kalapuya back in 2018. So it's going to be a joy to have Joe on now as the main presenter. And now I'd like to introduce David Harrelson, a good friend who's been with us. David and I talked about this in 2017, and I couldn't believe how not only positive but easy to work with David is, and how brilliant he is, and resourceful at coming up with new, fresh, lively programs for all this entire 7 years that we've been doing this. And we just had a conversation just yesterday, the day before, about continuing to make it lively. And I'm looking forward to David's ideas for the future. David, thank you for doing this, and I'll stop sharing and I'll shut up right now.
Thank you, Dave and Bonnie, and all of our guests for joining us. It's a real honor to be involved in this as a representative of the Grand Round tribe. I'm the Cultural Resources Manager for the tribe. I'm also Kalapuya. My ancestors are Kalapuya, and my ancestor Joseph Shangretta signed the treaty for Central Kalapuya, and when he was on the reservation was a headman and a leader for the Marys River Kalapuya people, or the Champinefu, which is sort of the focus of these talks. You know, I come up with who we asked to be a part of these, and I knew that with Joe being selected as an Indigenous Place Keeping Artist Fellowship for this year, that and the very positive response that we received previously with the Fire Since Time Immemorial webinar, that it stood out as an opportunity to be able to have Joe share about his work, because he was proposing to do all this work through his artist fellowship. That's one of the many hats I wear, as I administer the Indigenous Place Keeping Artist Fellowship. Awardees receive $20,000 to essentially work on a proposal and their art form throughout a year as a part of their own career development. Applications for that will actually be opening here in November. I'll be sending out an email next week, and applications will be due in about mid-January. If you know of anyone who has Indigenous connections to Western Oregon, from the Columbia River to the Klamath River, please encourage them to send me an email at david.harrelson@grandround.org, and be in touch. I'd be happy to send application materials. We've been able to fund 7 fellows over the last 2 years, and it's a program that's just continuing to really show great promise. So today we're going to hear from Joe about some of the work that he's been doing as a part of that fellowship. The things that I'll say about Joe: it's been an honor. The first time I met Joe was actually at that previous Champinefu event, but since then we've had the opportunity to work together. And there's a lot of teachings and lessons that Joe brings to tribal collaborative work. And one of those that I value and I still hold very close when I get myself stuck in spreadsheets and computer data is one time we were in a meeting and Joe just said, "We got to put our hands in the dirt." And there's just sort of a matter of fact, understanding, knowing, deeply caring, passionate person who Joe is. And he's a shiksh, as we say in Chinakawa. He's a teacher, and I'm really happy to have the opportunity to introduce him, and that he's agreed to join us. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Joe.
Wow. Chela, Joe Scott wa nashi Hu Chong Shu Shrinis. Hello, my name is Joe Scott. I'm a member of the Confederated Tribes of Siletz Indians. My ancestors are Takelma, Rogue River tribes, mouth of Jump Off Joe Creek, right there, right on the Rogue River, right by Table Rock. So I like to think of myself as a guest here on Kalapuya homeland. We're also down south, oak savanna people, acorn eaters, salmon eaters. So there's a lot of ecological overlap, a lot of ecological similarities, a lot of the same things that feed us, feed our bodies, feed our ancestors, feed our communities. So I feel like there's a kinship there. And since we also all ended up as relocated tribes on the Siletz and Grand Ronde Reservation sharing space there as well. I'm going to do my best to share my screen. Just full disclosure, today's been a day. Like my truck broke down, and I had 3 cavities filled. So, you know, I'll do my best. Please tell me that's working.
Looks great.
Nice. All right. Yeah, I think I already mentioned this. I'm a descendant of the Rogue tribes. My great aunt was Frances Johnson, really important informant and you know, a cultural treasure to us in that part of what is now Western Oregon. Shared a lot of stories. Some of the stories that I've drawn on in the work that I've been doing through the Indigenous Place Keeping Artists Fellowship. A lot of the knowledge, a lot of the practice, a lot of the tradition is found in these stories that Frances told and other informants in the late 1800s and early 1900s. The stories themselves, the anecdotes they tell of their youth, the things they share shape a lot of the work that I've been doing. Tell me about the materials and supplies, the techniques. It's amazing what lives in those stories. Anyway, I'm a fellow. I'm also the program director for the Traditional Ecological Inquiry Program, which is college and career readiness youth internship intertribal program based near Eugene. So I think we have to ground ourselves, kind of give some context for this work. What brought me to this place and what brought us as a community and as a regional community to this point where, you know, our lives are impacted by catastrophic wildfire and other bad forms of fire, and really kind of remind ourselves that you know, fire is a basic element, not unlike water, earth, and air. They're elements that we're made of, and that you know, shape who we are, and that can be a positive force in our lives, force for change, transformation. My friend Esther Stutzman, this is a great quote from her. The first whites in the Willamette Valley did not tame a wilderness, they inherited a park. And there's still little bits and pieces of that park. A tiny fraction of 1% of the oak prairie savanna that really defined the Willamette Valley remains. And even those little bits are at grave risk from development often, agriculture, the things that have threatened them in the past continue to, and people out there working to save those important ecosystems that are just so vital to acorn eaters and the people who've lived off the land here. Yeah. So that bottom right picture is a sketch from someone who first came into this country, took what they saw and wrote and drew a sketch of the Willamette Valley. And as you can see, way back then in the 1800s, the Willamette River was a meander that crossed back and forth across the valley. Riparian areas of fir and pine, but great big meadows, wet meadow, and groves and outcroppings of big, beautiful oak trees. And that center picture is pretty great. It's actually right by a high school, I think, outside of Marcola. And one of the students went over there and was like smoking a cigarette or something, lit it up, and, you know, objectively not a good thing, setting fire to a meadow like that. But lo and behold, here 3 years later after that, there's an abundant and thriving camas community out there. After all that shrubbery and overgrowth and choking foliage has been removed. So, you know, this is a reflection of the good things that fire can do. You know, this is an image that boy, it's really not a very high quality image, but it shows basically what are often considered the bands and tribes of what makes up the confederacies, the Siletz and Grand Ronde confederacies. They're frequently reflect language groups, but really sort of show us that our ancestors are tied to watersheds, and are closely associated with the ecologies, the very unique ecologies that make up the various watersheds of what is now Western Oregon. Like I mentioned, we were forced off of our homelands. Again, my ancestors down there in what is now southwestern Oregon, after the Rogue Wars, were forced onto what is was the Table Rock Reservation, and from there watched over their shoulders as their homeland faded into the distance, and they were forced to march up through what is like where I-5 is now, and up along the Oregon coast and on steamships up through the Columbia River, and landed at the Siletz Reserve and the Grand Ronde Reserve. And you know, a lot of folks think of this as you know, our land being removed from our land or losing our land. It's so much more than land. It's the ecologies. We ceded these lands, but really what we did was we ceded the whole ecosystems, these whole ecosystems that our ancestors were a part of, where the human beings made these ecosystems whole and were on equal footing with all the other living things there, and worked with the elements like fire to tend the land as the land tended us and fed us and made us healthy and kept our communities whole. Yeah. So there's little sort of glimmers, little bits of the past that you can very much still find on the landscape out there that reflect this beautiful and abundant oak and prairie ecosystem that is now either often developed or has been encroached through fire suppression that has allowed conifers, particularly Douglas fir, to grow in places it wouldn't have grown in the past. So these conifers that grow super fast and suck up all the water threaten these beautiful oak trees. There's a picture there of folks doing some burning, playing some stick game out there in a field, and it's you can't see it in the picture, but they're at the foot of Mount Hood. So this is folks having a good time in the summer, and they've got fire going. I just love this picture. That oak in the center is a massive black oak that's in the West Eugene wetlands, and that tree is hundreds of years old. And the West Eugene wetlands is very indicative of what the valley floor looked like: wet meadow with camas and yampa and all kinds of delicious root crops and bulbs and corms and tubers, and then of course those oak trees. On the bottom left there is it's a black oak, a white oak, and a madrone, and they're sister trees. They're all growing out of the same trunk, and you know, these are cultivated trees. These are things that people planted together. You know, this is an important spot. You know, people have been cultivating these trees and tending to them. Bottom right there, we found burn scars. So those are, you know, those are a message that burning was happening hundreds of years ago up until the turn of the last century, and even a little beyond too. And there are often fire scars, and you can learn a tremendous amount from these marks that are on these trees. You can tell what time of year people were burning, how intense the fires were, the direction the wind was coming from. It's amazing. You can read these like messages from the past, like I was saying. And this is actually Rattlesnake Butte. This is a Grand Ronde property, that giant oak tree there. And they're hundreds of years old, like I said, and they're hidden back there in the shadows, and they're reaching and reaching and reaching and reaching for the sun, and they're surrounded by these conifers. And you look and you think about the work that's happening there at Rattlesnake Butte, and they're putting fire back on the ground there, and they're letting culture lead that work. And eventually I see those trees, I'm like, those are going to be out in the sun again. Those are going to start producing acorns again. Those are going to be feeding the people again because of work with fire. Bottom right there, that's outside of Oak Ridge. Gee, why do you think they call it Oak Ridge? Well, it's because you know, a little further up the road, there's a great big old oak meadow. And it's, again, it's completely encroached by firs, but you can see there, those are rings in that tree, and they show fire scars, that it was burned. It was burned every other year, very consistently, which reflects a human presence on the land there. So this is now, I do a lot of work. The work I do is in the Long Tom watershed, what is now the Long Tom watershed. And there is a map, the yellow, the brown, those are, yellow is the prairie oak, brown is mixed oak woodland, the green is riparian areas. That's what people found when they came into the country. This is what people created. This is what the indigenous people here tended with fire and made this landscape of abundance. And now on the right-hand side is what you see. Those are the little bits that remain. And, you know, there's some sort of curious approaches to restoration that are happening outside of the work with fire. And I don't know how this picture ended up there, but what you can see is there are a few oak trees in there. There's been a clear cut done. They got rid of all the conifers there. And the other conifers that are around there are dried up. They're dying. They're drought stressed. They're on the way out. The oak trees are drought stressed, and they've replanted conifers. So there's one of the approaches that that is a little misguided and more resource focused, with it in mind that someday maybe these trees might be cut down for some other purpose. But the truth is, they're going to get to a certain age and they're going to be drought stressed. The climate is changing, and those trees are just going to become fuel for another catastrophic wildfire. So we have to think about those things, the long game, when we're working with fire, and when we're thinking about the practical application of fire. So this is what happens. This is, you know, 175 years of settler colonial fire suppression. The messaging from that has been through the last, you know, century and a half that fire is bad. Smokey the Bear says only you can prevent fire, basically, which of course sets fire up to be the enemy, which of course also sets people up who work with fire and who use intentional fire. It makes those people and their practice the enemy as well. So again, there's a lot of really violent language associated with fire suppression. Sometimes very heavy attack, forever war, terms like that, war against fire. You know, fire is not our enemy. Fire in a good way is beneficial to all of us. I think a lot of us here in Western Oregon remember 2020 Holiday Farm fire. This is actually during the fire, right out in front of my house. The air was full of this bad smoke. Lots of people lost their homes. Terrible trauma. Also down in Southern Oregon, this trauma exists to this day. People are still out of their homes. The land is damaged and hurting. And yeah, that's, you know, these are some of the consequences. So kind of transitioning abruptly into where fire exists in a good way, just take a look at some of these food plants. And these are things that have sustained us. These are things that were an important part of our diet, things that made us healthy and can make us healthy and well again. Camas, right there in the center, you know, cultural fire, burning in low intensity fires in grasslands, returns nutrients to the soil that benefit those bulbs. It allows digging, much easier digging, because it breaks up that thatch that's so hard to dig through. You know, tilling the soil adds oxygen, oxygenates the soil, and it's just super good for anything growing under the ground. There's a little bit of little tarweed sprout there. Again, thrives on the nutrients that fire puts back in the soil. There's some yampa there, one of my very favorites, wild carrots, delicious. And of course, oak trees. Oak trees depend on fire for a variety of reasons, or work well with fire. So one of the things that I found through the fellowship work is the role of fire in societies and how language shapes that relationship. There are a lot of place names in Takelman, down in southwestern Oregon. You know, place names, we never named places after human being people, or you know, things. We frequently named them after how you got there, what you might find when you got there, or how the land reflected the human presence. So I love some of these words, and I have trouble pronouncing some of them, but Ginkwath is a burning place. So that's Round Top down there in southwestern Oregon, what's called Round Top now. Nupton, we are burning it off place. So that's another location downriver, closer to the mouth of the Rogue. Tantipta, gathering meadow there. So this was a message. You could share the information about this place. It was used during the Rogue Wars, a time of hunger and hiding from the troops. And it was a message to our people that you could find a resource here when you were hungry. And I'll talk about that one again in a little bit. That's a fire carrier. So a person in the community who's the person who's responsible for the fire. Fire means the same thing. Home, it's the same word in Kalapuya. So I found an Aboriginal word that's kupa, and fire and extended family are the same word. So the hearth, the fire, the center of the home is the same thing as what brings together the extended family. And there's a really interesting map there of that word and just how all the connections go together, the etymology of the word. I'm not going to try to go through it, but it really reflects like how fire is at the center of this huge web of meaning at the, you know, that has fire at the heart of it, the hearth. So just real quick, kind of looking at the difference between prescribed fire and cultural fire. You know, there are a lot of agency definitions, agencies like the Forest Service, the BLM, they've been working with fire and I would say stewardship for a long time, and have used methods that have ultimately led to a lot of the fuel buildup that we see causing these wildfires. They're starting to use prescribed fire as a tool, sort of looking at indigenous practice, recognizing that there's wisdom in what was happening in the old days and what can happen again. They're using it in a different way than cultural fire. So prescribed fire is about meeting management objectives, managing resources, looking at value, the values outside of what, you know, for human people, food value, community value. Cultural fire, I love it. My friend Ron Good, Chairman Ron Good of the Northern Mono Tribe, says cultural fire is fire for culture. We'll get to that. So yeah, cultural burns passed down through the generations. I don't like just reading slides out loud. I mentioned this before though. Culturally led fire returns nutrients to the soil. A lot of the plants, meadow plants, are actually dependent on fire, whether that's to spread the seeds or to return, like I said, return the nutrients to the soil, to aerate the soil. To add ashes. It's a important and often vital, often plants have to have those things, have to have fire. Community, kind of, again, sort of an abrupt transition. Like now we're looking at cultural fire and the things that actually make me excited, the work that I've been doing through the Indigenous Place Keeping Artist Fellowship has been with cultural fire. And I think you have to start with community, that it's fire, it's community with fire at its heart. And these are just some great pictures of, we went down to Ron Good's place, Mariposa, California. There's There's elders and families there peeling sourberry sticks. That's what they burn for. We burn for hazel sticks a lot of times up here for our basketry. They use sourberry sticks for their weaving. And that's a bunch of folks just hanging out during the burn, peeling sticks. There's youth. There's little kids. They're not afraid of fire. They know how to work with fire. It's not a dangerous thing. Like kids know how to swim, right? So yeah, it's just beautiful when you see community coming together with fire, with fire in their eyes, fire in their heart. These are a couple of other community restoration, land restoration pictures. We got together in southwestern Oregon, had a fire. Youth started it. That's a little girl is actually using a traditional fire starter to get the fire going. Just burned a tiny little area, but we did it. We went down there, we got together, we used traditional tools, and we made the fire. So this is a reflection of some of the really important Indigenous science. A lot of our practices in the past have been seen as sort of quaint. I think the larger European scientific world has overlooked a lot of Indigenous practice without realizing that it's not only true science, but it's vital science to these ecologies that we seeded, these ecologies that we're removed from. And this is a pretty cool reflection of some of that work, and it's just a seasonal cycle. And I don't want to go through all the details of it, but the point is, the key is that burning the right kind of fire at the exact right time of year takes care of, or actually controls, the acorn weevil. It interrupts their life cycle. So consistent burning, summertime burning, year after year, actually has the effect of reducing the number of these acorn weevils, increasing production. So good fire. Great example, place called Smithfield Oaks. This is adjacent to Basket Slough, which is actually real close to Grand Ronde, south side of Salem. There's a picture on the left, that's 1932. And there's already some encroachment in that picture, but you can see there are great big groves of oak trees, these beautiful oak trees, those ones that look like cauliflower kind of, right? So in that little red circle there, we actually identified a few of these oaks that still existed in 2011, which is where that other picture comes from. And in 2011, you start to see the effects of fire suppression. All of the openings, the meadow openings have started to grow over. All of those oak trees are starting to be shaded out. So we were able to we got together with the Luckamute Watershed Council, Polk County Soil and Water Conservation District, OSU Extension, a whole bunch of people. And this is a picture of some of the oak trees that are there. I mean, I don't know if you can see the tiny little Joe standing next to that one, but they're just magnificent trees. So we got together and decided to have a community event. Started looking at that science. It was actually an intern project, their inquiry project for the internship, and decided to have this event at Smithfield Oaks, start doing some of that burning. And this is what it looked like. It looked like youth working with youth, using traditional tools, using traditional techniques, using community-based consensus on how things would come together and what made sense to people. And it was a night burn. It went into the night. And talk about inherent beauty. Like, that is just the beauty of a community coming together with fire. That picture, that lower picture. So again, another sort of abrupt transition. One of the things that's just amazing to me about fire is where it turns up in our stories, our traditions, and our ceremonies. One of the most important animals, one of the first animals before the human people came to the world, one of the animals was the woodpecker, pileated woodpecker. And of course, those are the ones that have that beautiful red top knot on their heads. And I'll get more on those in just a second. But they are 100% dependent on oak trees for granaries, for the oaks. for the insects that they eat as well. We had an opportunity to do some burning in Yurok country, and as soon as the fires were out, those pileated woodpeckers were in the treetops above us yelling at us, "Get out of here, like you're done. You've done the fire. Now it's time for you to go. We're going to do the woodpecker stuff." But keep in mind, like, what does that look like on the woodpecker's head, right? What does that look like? Well, these are some pictures of regalia, traditional ceremonial regalia. People of what is now southwestern Oregon, Klamath tribes, Yurok, Karuk, Hupa, have world renewal ceremonies at solstices. And that ceremony is about honoring the creator and promising the creator that we've done a good job of tending the land, of following the rules as they were set down. And the creator promises to send us the next generation. It's also a display of wealth, a way of showing off your regalia. And those pieces of regalia, each one of those little red things is a pileated woodpecker scalp. So they're taking the fire from, we're taking the fire from the woodpeckers. After feeding them and working with them, they give us this fire and we wear it on hats and dance it through the night. And you can see the firelight like flickering on them in the night. It's absolutely gorgeous. Boy, and that's a picture of me there when I was much younger, and another little pileated woodpecker scalp there. Really awesome archival picture of jump dance. And you can just see how much work goes into making that regalia, and how much work it is working with the oak trees and the animals themselves in this reciprocal way, to have ceremony to say we're doing the right thing, to make sure that the acorn woodpeckers and the pileated woodpeckers are still there. So stick engineering, right? I love this term. I have the opportunity to have about a half acre here in Peoria. It's kind of by Harrisburg a little bit. And I have a few hazel plants planted around my yard. So I do small fires in the fall and in the winter and burn off my hazel. Hazel sticks, which is the fundamental material, hazel sticks and spruce root, need fire. If you want straight sticks, if you want clear sticks, if you want the best weavers possible, you burn the hazel. You burn the hazel in the fall or early spring, and it sprouts back long and straight and clear and clean. And that's important. Being able to make those sticks using fire as a tool, as a tending mechanism, right? And that's science. So yeah, those are some sticks I picked. But yeah, this is these are some pictures, a couple of pictures of people weaving, and you can see those hazel sticks are just perfect. They're straight, they're clear. I'm holding some sticks. It's hard to take pictures of sticks. I don't know. Yeah, I take a lot of stick pictures and they're just never easy. But I'm kind of holding up some hazel sticks that have grown up out of a plant that was burned off the year before, and they're just perfect. And these are again, you know, returning to that use of fire and that intersection between fire and ceremony. These are basket caps, ceremonial basket caps that are worn by women during World Renewal ceremony. And all of the bits and pieces that go into these ceremonial caps are fire dependent plants, whether it's the beargrass overlay, the woodwardia fern, the hazel, the spruce that needs the nutrients returned back to the soil. All of these things are fire dependent. And I feel like these look a lot like acorn tops. And yeah, again, stick engineering is vital to cultural endurance and over time. So baby baskets, those need a certain kind of stick. Those baby baskets, those cradle baskets called gayu, the sticks that are in them have a certain buoyancy. The way they're constructed keeps the head up if the basket falls into the water. Like, you need to be able to make the right kind of stick for that. You need to be able to have access to the right kind of stick, and that the way that is done is with cultural burning, is with burning on a cultural scale, on a community scale. And that's a quiver. I mean, how important is it to have a quiver full of arrows if you're out hunting, right? You need the right quiver. There's a acorn basket, so that it's actually upside down, the one that's funnel shaped, that goes on top of a mortar, and it's where acorns are ground. So it's not only beautiful, it's functional, and it's necessary, and it's tied to fire ecology. Bottom one is a fish trap. Absolutely have to have the right kind of sticks for that too. You know, catching food, catching fish to feed your family, your people, is dependent on the fire ecology that makes those sticks. So this is kind of a point I wanted to make, just about where all this beautiful technology ended up after fires were suppressed, after the utility of our baskets changed. The settler market took over after our people wove for our cultural purposes. Once we were relocated and we're dependent on pots and pans and all the things that that the settler society imposed on us, all these incredible skills that lived in the hands and hearts and minds of our women went into making objects like this, which retain the beauty, reflect the skill, but were sold for pennies, which were sold for a pittance to the settler market. Yeah. So now to the Placekeeping Artist Fellowship. This is me arriving at the Sitka Center for Art and Ecology for my residency, which was an opportunity to take all the sticks. I took all the sticks I'd picked for the last 6 months with all this work in mind. And I tell you, it's just, I'm a stick guy. And they're sticks and they're bits of wood, and all of these ingredients are, you know, I could tell you what all of them are just by looking at them. You know, it's black willow pithwood, it's white oak bark, it's pitchwood, it's different kinds of wood and sticks with different purposes. And all of them are reflected in some of the objects I made too. So, oh yeah, so this is my workshop at home. This is why Sitka Center was so valuable to me, because I had space to work. Yeah, this is me trying to work in my shop at home. But this is also where the idea of my project for the IPKA fellowship came from. I was looking at the circularity, the way my shop was laid out, and how different seasonal projects were arranged in this sort of arc. And I realized that it represented time, and that the different projects reflected seasonality. And it came to my mind that I could make this into a year-long project that reflected the seasonal rounds, the beauty of community, and all the objects and the plants that grow at the different seasons. And it all came together, inspired by David Harrelson to apply, and here I am. I just thought I'd say a couple notes about the materials that go into some of this work. On the left there is a picture of willow root, which turns up over and over again as a hearth. The hearth is the part of a fire drill, a fire starter that's got the hole in it. That's the hearth part. And willow root turns up over and over again. There was a beautiful willow tree in the yard down below the house. And I was looking at that root and I'm thinking, I could really use that root, but it's going to involve me chopping root off the bottom of a beautiful willow tree at Sitka Center. And so I bypassed that idea. But yeah, so there's also in the center a picture of drying out elk crap. Elk poop is one of the ingredients in traditional glue, traditional adhesive that is used in the fire drills and fixing arrows, and all kinds of things. And I'll show you a picture about of that one too. Yeah, there was high quality elk poop at Sitka Center, which was really helpful because I was looking for some. These are some of the ingredients I used. This is a filtered pine pitch, which is a purified pitch that heated up to a certain temperature, has a certain quality. It's mixed with, there you go, there's the elk poop, pulverized elk poop. Little bit of charcoal, specific charcoal certain kind of charcoal prepared in a certain way, reduced charcoal, and it's all mixed together and it becomes glue and adhesive. I picked up some mussel shells while I was there, and that'll become apparent. And these are some of the fire starters I made. And they're just beautiful. The ingredients that go into them were described in clear detail in a lot of the stories I was reading. A lot of our origin stories tell of where fire comes from and where fire ends up, where fire lives, whether it's in a piece of redwood, whether it's in a piece of incense cedar, whether it's in a piece of driftwood. So I took all of those materials and I experimented with them, and I made all these fire drills and fire hearths. There's Western red cedar there. There's grape wood. One of the tips is grape wood. There's all these beautiful materials, and the holes where the drill goes themselves, they're engineered. Like, there's so much science involved in them. There's tiny little wedge notches in them where the powdered embers can fall, so you can blow on them and add a little bit of tinder. It's a machine. Like, it's this beautiful machine. Carrying fire is a thing too, right? It involves having a way to keep fire with you when you travel up into the mountains to go hunting. It's not always easy to use a fire drill and start a fire. It can be easier if you're traveling for a day to just take your fire with you. Again, you need the exact right type of materials, a kind of bark, a kind of fungus. Different stories tell different things, different ecologies, different watersheds. Everybody has their own way of doing things. So I was able to create the ashes and the bark and all the things, and was able to carry fire in a shell. So ceremony is an important part of this fire ceremony. There's a lot of ceremony that goes with starting fire, with carrying fire, with knowing fire, with being a leader in the fire community. Like, there's a lot involved. And these are some of the ingredients, some of the things that made sense. A lot of these things are based on, ancestral knowledge, things that make sense to us. Some of the stories that are told tell how fire is carried, how fires are started. And we actually had an opportunity at Camp Creek Hills, which is a Siletz property, to carry fire to the site, start a little fire there. Everyone went out with burning pitch sticks, and those are pitch sticks there. They're just really fatty, flammable sticks from pine trees. And the whole fire was started with pitch sticks and youth and tribal members in a way that allowed it to burn just the way the fire needed to burn. There were no drip torches. There was no equipment involved. It was just us with pitch sticks and fire and community. So ocean spray is a plant that grows all over around in the valley and in the mountains. It's everywhere. And it's a lot like hazel. Once it's burned off at the ground, it shoots up these perfect straight switches. And this is doing some burning down in Southern Oregon, raking it. The soil turns a particular purple color. That way, the oxidation has happened in this proper way. And then you cut the little tips off, and it's ready for spring. It's ready for those straight sticks to come up. And of course, those become the most important part of the game. They become cards, what are called cards. And they're these tiny, tiny, tiny little sticks that are made out of split ocean spray and then whittled down into these perfect little sticks. They have to be exactly the same, or it's like cheating at cards, right? Like, if your sticks aren't all the same, it's like your cards aren't all the same. So all those little sticks have to be exactly the same. So gambling with fire, that means, like, all of these things that you can see in these pictures are fire associated in one way or another. Those are dentalium shells. Those are huge dentalium shells. They're called death payment shells, but that's a whole nother story for a whole nother presentation. But that's my deck of sticks at this point. I have almost 3 dozen of them, which is enough to start playing the game. I made a traditional square drum using fire dependent materials like Western red cedar. It's using that pitch glue that's elk hide, and all of those things benefit from cultural fire. These are the rest of the slideshow is pictures of the ingredients, pictures of some of the things that I've used, some of the things that I've discovered as being crucial to fire ecology, cultural fire. There's smoldering pithwood in the center there. It has this very consistent low heat burning quality that allows it to be carried from place to place. There's some pitch sticks there. There's some mugwort. Mugwort is important lung medicine, and it's also used as a ceremonial fire starter. Hazel, there's some hazel switches there, nice straight ones, and some spruce root, which are not only weaving materials, but also are used to tie up a lot of the fire drills. This is something that emerged. What is that called? I forgot the name. Mock orange is another plant that's used for those little sticks. And I was looking everywhere for it, out in the woods. I was looking everywhere, and it's in my yard. It's right by the road. It took it for it to bloom, and I'm like, oh yeah, and there's a mock orange just right there. But that's what pitchwood looks like when it's in a stump, pine tree stump. The best pitchwood is from a burned stump. It burns all the wood off and leaves the pitch on the inside. And that's a piece of redwood lumber. And I got to looking at it, and I'm like, I think this is beautiful under here. And of course, a board is really just another kind of a stick. So I went for it. I cleaned it up, and there it is. It's all beautiful. There's that pitch glue works as very similar to drip torch fuel, so it'll start fires. If you light that with a pitch stick, that black material, it drips on the ground and carries fire with it, so it can actually be used to start fires. Still working on that one. There's a gray pine there in a little pot, and they're fire dependent plants. They survived all the wildfires down there, the campfire, the fires down in Northern California. All the conifers burned up, but those gray pines are fine. And the cones produce seeds, pine nuts. The pine nuts are used, they're delicious, but they're also used to make beads. All those beads, part of the ceremony, part of the world renewal ceremony, part of our regalia. So this is really like when we go back to our homeland and do this fire, get together in community, put fire on the ground, like we're restoring our ecology and we're restoring ecological sovereignty. We're getting our first foods back in our diet. We're getting together as community. We're working with fire. So getting to do this work through the fellowship has just been, I think you can tell I'm pretty excited about it. And I still have months of this work to do. So yeah, here we are carrying fire back to the homeland. One last thing, couple last things actually. Lightning trees that are struck by lightning, and the charcoal that's made is a special kind of charcoal, and it's the charcoal that's used for men to make tattoos on their arms. That are the tattoos used to measure strands of dentalium. So I found this at the top of Upper Table Rock, this lightning struck madrone tree. Got myself some charcoal, still waiting on the tattoo. And then last story is the lightning tree. And I think I've told David Harrelson this lightning tree story, but I was gnashing my teeth and pulling my hair. I'm like, how am I going to start fire? Where's this fire for the fellowship going to come from? And I'm driving home from Grand Ronde. There's a thunderstorm, lightning everywhere. It's beautiful. I love lightning. And I'm like, hey, neat. One of those that tree got struck by lightning, and it was on fire from top to bottom, bottom to top. Drove on past it, got home, like, where am I going to find this fire? Oh my gosh, I can't use a fire drill. I have arthritis. Where's it going to come from? Drove back and forth past this tree a couple of times as it smoldered down into the ground. One day I drove by after a big rainstorm, and it was still smoking. And I'm like, there's the fire. So that was an interesting conversation. I knocked on the farmhouse door. The guy came out. He told me his fire story. You know, the house had been struck, you know, this tree was right by the house. It blew all the windows out. Like, he had a great story. So I took a bunch of that charcoal. I took the fire out of the tree. I took it home, and I've had a candle burning ever since. So that's the lightning tree story. Pretty sure that's it.
Great. Thank you so much. That was wonderful. I want to remind the audience to submit questions. I'll look through and see what we've got right now. Nancy asked, when the hazel plant is burned, does it burn well even when the wood is still alive and wet?
So just from my observation, yes. I mean, it burns off. There's frequently other material with it. One of the things that we do is called coppicing, which means it's cut off right at the ground. And then you take the coppiced material that you've cut off, and this is in previously untended hazel, and pile it up on top or in late summer, and it dries. And then in fall and in winter, when you burn, that's really where the fuel comes from. But if there's also other material around underneath the trees, that works.
Thank you. Someone out of curiosity, I don't know if you'll actually know the answer to this or not, but do you know when the last time there might have been fire around the Pudding River area?
I don't think I know where that is. But is it in the valley?
They don't really specify, so I'm not sure. And it seems like a little bit of a personal question. We've got a new one. Has burning been shown to also disturb the cycle of the Mediterranean oak borer?
That's pretty recent arrival. And that's as far as I know. And that's like a big deal in oak and acorn country. And anything that adds heat and kills a bug is going to have some kind of an effect. I really don't know. It's Mediterranean. Those folks there have been burning since time immemorial as well. I mean, these fire traditions are from all over the world. So surely someone there has been looking at this as something that disrupts their food cycle. So surely using fire in some way.
Thank you. Some people have chimed in about the location of Pudding River. It's near Woodburn. It's in Clackamas County, divides Marion and Clackamas, if that rings any bells.
It's really about like the larger history of fire suppression in the valley. Fire in the valley was made illegal at some point, and Native people who burned were put in jail sometimes. In the early days, when there was less law, Native people could be killed for lighting fires with intent. So
thank you. Someone else asked, is there any traditional foods or fibers or medicines that, sorry, I should have made sure I understood this first. Let's see, maybe you'll understand this. Is there any traditional foods or fibers or medicines that doesn't have some kind of connection to fire? Can we say that the Kalapuya had a fire-dependent culture?
I love that term. Fire dependent culture, fire adjacent culture, right? I mean, if you really think about it, everything needs fire. It's like everything needs water, everything needs earth in some way, or the air, like all the elements go in there somewhere. We're all like kept in motion by fire, like the heat from the sun. So ultimately, we're really all dependent on heat and fire, and yeah, in one way or another. And in terms of like literally burning, burning has the effect of returning nutrients back to the soil. And it clears waterways, it increases flow, water flow. So all those things are going to have a benefit.
Thank you. Someone else says, I could listen to you talk for another hour. Thank you for sharing. Do you ever run into any problems when harvesting these forest products, and how do you get around that?
Barriers to us harvesting our first foods and materials is the problem. Being able to access land consistently that is not in tribal hands is a constant challenge. So, showing up at a place you've been tending hazel for 10 years and it's turned into an apartment complex, your favorite thimbleberry patch or something like that, has been mowed or sprayed with pesticides. Anything that isn't under our direct control is in constant danger of being disrupted in a way that makes it unharvestable. So, having conservation property, having cultural conservation stewardship arrangements with the tribal people, finding ways of working with Indigenous people and practitioners in a way that allows intergenerational tending and gathering, like that's the thing. And it's like fire really, fire, it's like a friend of mine said, once you burn it, you can't unburn it. And I don't know, is that like really philosophical? Is it insightful? It sounds great. So yeah.
Thank you. There are a few questions about acorns, like questions like, do you have favorite tasting acorns? Do individual trees have different flavors?
I'm so glad you asked that. That's a whole nother presentation too. But yeah, so just anecdotally, I read some research recently, a guy who's doing research on the Smith River, Northern California, Tolowa country. And there's a place called I think it's Willow Flat. And there's an oak grove associated with a large village site. And people traveled from all over the region to get acorns, to get acorn flour from this community because it was notoriously awesome. And that would have been tan oak, which we don't have here. We have black oak, white oak. The northern range of black oak is around the Eugene area. My personal favorite is probably black oak, although tan oak is a close second. White oak is real tanniny and bitter. A lot of work.
Does burning affect acorn flavor and nutrition?
It affects the tree. So one of the things that that happens during fire is that heat and smoke goes up through the tree, and depending on when in its life cycle, when in its flowering cycle, when in its setting fruit cycle you're doing that, it has an impact on how the fruit is set, how it develops. Is there some kind of scientific study on that? Like, that's for another day. But I think you can sort of assume that there is an impact. And again, returning nutrients to the soil in this good way, so the roots can access it, definitely has an impact on the entire tree, the whole being, the whole organism.
Thank you. Someone asked, do you have any recommendations for Indigenous scholars and practitioners for those of us who are wanting a deeper knowledge of ancestral fire practices and how we can support those practices in becoming commonplace going forward?
So I have access to those things. I certainly don't have them off the top of my head, but I can see if I can put something together that we could share with folks. There are some really amazing, like Ariel Halprin, formerly from Southern Oregon University, has done research. I have a couple of friends at OSU Extension with a lot of knowledge. There's the Willamette Valley Fire Collaboration, which is an Indigenous-led, all Indigenous fire crew that works in cultural fire. There are a number of groups and a number of researchers, like quite a lot, and more. Cultural Fire Management Council is one. I mentioned Ron Good. He's a leader in cultural fire. I just got together actually at the retreat, or at the residency, got together with some other tribal leaders and practitioners, and we decided we're going to have an exchange, a cultural fire exchange. So there's a lot happening right now. And I'll see if I can gather some resources, but probably not tonight.
Sure. Oh, of course. Sure. Yeah. If you can share any, we can share them out, but no problem. Thank you. Are there any local organizations that you and or the Confederated Tribes of Siletz and Grand Ronde currently partner with for cultural burning?
Oh boy. That's so did work with the Willamette Valley Fire Collaboration. They've done workshops with both tribes on cultural fire, a couple of cultural fire trainings, workshops. We, the inquiry program, worked together with Greg Archuleta, who does a Lifeways class with Grand Ronde. We partnered on the Smithfield Oaks Night Burn project. So there are some collaborations.
Great. And someone asked, as part of your fellowship, will you be communicating what you've learned to others?
Yes. Yeah, yes. There, I'm still kind of working on that. There's a kind of a wide open, like, how is this work going to become a part of the community? Like, how am I going to show up? How does it reach people? And there are a lot of different ways of thinking about it, from like putting the objects in a museum to archiving things and keeping them within the tribe. And a lot to think about. Like, there's a lot to think about still. I realized during the residency, like, I'm excited. It's exciting work. It's something that is thrilling to me and gives me life and energy. It's also a lot, you know what I mean? Like, it's a lot. There's a lot that goes into it. So I have to figure out how it's going to come out.
Yeah,
If that makes sense.
definitely. Lindsay asked, are the fire carriers and stick makers typically male or female?
Oh, that's another question that I love. A lot of the gender roles have changed a lot. There are a lot of descriptions in the archives of how gender and this work went together. One thing I do know from my research is that in some communities, and this is frequent, like this is throughout, specifically like the Caribbean and in South and Central America, women keep the hearth. So like the fire in the home, the fire that lasts and lasts, and men carried fire, like would carry fire up into the mountains or from place to place. So there's this sort of collaboration on keeping the fire alive. One of the best stories is about a Southwestern tribe, and at the beginning of each new year, they extinguish all the fires and the men start new ones and then distribute it in the community. And it's kept by the women and carried by the men.
Thank you. Have you been able to get any no poison, no spray contracts or agreements with different stewardship restoration organizations?
Yeah. Yes. The former Andrew Reasoner Preserve, which is now Cha Mali, which is our classroom, the inquiry program's classroom, where it's under a somewhat restrictive conservation easement. However, part of that easement says we're not using spray. We're not gonna use chemicals. People are growing food here. Let's not use chemicals.
Are there preferred seasons for cultural fires that minimize wildfire risk?
There's this thing I've been learning more and more about, and that's fire diversity. I think our ancestors, for one thing, we didn't face the fire suppression thing I was talking about. Like, we didn't face that. We burned consistently and constantly in a way that kept all the wildfire, it's probably something that happened in the mountains. In fact, there are records of it, large fires like in the mountains. but fires in our village areas, fires in the valley were low intensity, small, and they happen throughout the year for different reasons on different scales. Everything from small piles around the bases of it's called organism level burning, kind of a weird term, but small, like little piles around the base of an oak tree, to doing like meadow landscape wide broadcast burns through grassland. So not a lot, it just wasn't a lot of wildfire.
Gotcha. Someone asked, will this lecture be available as a recording? Yes, it will. It will be sent out to everyone who registered for this event, as well as posted to the library's YouTube channel. And I think we've pretty much covered it for tonight. So I'd love to invite Dave and David back if you guys want to have any parting words or want to say anything else before we close off.
Something to keep a lookout for is that the Cultural Resources Department at Grand Round has compiled and is in the process of compiling a number of traditional stories that feature Western Oregon Indigenous fire as a main principle to that, and should be released sometime in the next month or two. And copies will be available at Chichalu Museum and Cultural Center.
Great. Great. Well, thank you so much, Joe, for your time. Thank you, David. Thank you, Dave. And thanks to our audience. Thank you all for being here. I hope that you will share this recording with everyone that might be interested. And we'll see you in December, I hope, in person. Have a great night, everybody. Bye-bye.